evening, everyone, and welcome to the Consciousness Café. My name is Mark Hunter Brooks. I'll be with you this evening interviewing Bill Bengston, who's our presenter tonight. And he wrote a long time ago a book called The Energy Cure. And that has since led him to a number of years doing alternative medicine or energy medicine research. And he's focused on research, not on the practitioner side of it. And I think we'll talk about some of that stuff, but most of the things that he's done has been organized, controlled studies of alternative medicine techniques, hands-on healing techniques that actually work very well and worked very well a number of years ago. And Bill, I'll let you, I won't steal your thunder on the exciting things that happened with your mice studies when you initially did them. But that's what really set you apart, I think, from a lot of other people. So before I let Bill do his thing, I want to say we will be recording the conversation this evening. We'll be turning everyone's microphones off onto mute so that Bill and I can speak, and then Leslie Rice is going to be leading the Q&A afterwards. If you have a question that you'd like to ask, raise your hand and we'll recognize you there. And the way you do that is you go down to the little menu at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and you'll see reactions where you can raise or lower your hand, and that's how we'll recognize you this evening. And we'll put some information in the chat during the presentation. I know I have Bill's website loaded so that it'll be up there for you to see, but he's going to talk about that as well. So without further ado, I'd like to...
May I just say that if they have a question, they don't have to raise their hand. They can ask the question in the chat session, and those will be asked in order.
Okay, thank you, Leslie.
Welcome.
And we'll go ahead and mute everyone's microphone so Bill can talk, and then we'll do Q&A afterwards. But Bill Bengston is a PhD. He has a PhD in sociology, I believe. Got started in alternative energy. Sorry, I got muted. I was going to say, Bill, if you could tell us a little bit about how you got involved in energy healing and what led you to this lifetime of work in doing these studies, that would be a great way to get you started and introduce yourself to the group that's here.
Sure, thanks. And welcome everybody, and look forward to having a little bit of fun in the next hour or so. Just in advance, because I'm going to move off this slide in a couple of minutes. You have here, if you want, I got a website, and you can go play on the website, and you can see lots of stuff and resources and papers and things that you may or may not want to read. I also have email here, and so I'm gettable, so to speak. But in answer to your question, how did I get started? A little over 100 years ago, I happened to have a very bad back, and I had to give up a swimming scholarship for college. And so I walked around with back pain, like many people walk around with back pain. I'd been in pain for a number of years. I was a butterflyer, and butterflyers shouldn't have bad backs. Nonetheless, I had to give up butterfly. And I ran into a guy who spontaneously turned into a psychic, and he spontaneously went from a psychic to a healer, and then he spontaneously put his hands on my back, and I was the first person he ever did this to, and I had a really weird sensation of almost like Novocaine, and that the Novocaine numbed me. It was about this big on my back, and then like Novocaine wears off if everybody's had it, that was the last pain I had. And so that was the end of the back pain. And so the question was, for me, what in heaven's name happened? Because I don't believe this stuff, but something happened to me. And so my question was, what do I do with it? Do I pursue it? Do I walk away and pretend it didn't happen? And for better or for worse, I decided to try to figure out what in heaven's name had happened to me. And I'll tell you now, 100 years later, I still don't know. So to cut to the chase, if you want to leave and call it an early night, I still don't know how healing works. I figured I was going to give it another 35, 40 years of investigation, and then I'm going to take some time off. But that's the really short version. So we went from putting his hands on my back to me following him around, putting his hands on other people who were sick. All these people, interesting things happened to them, unbelievable things happened to them. And I watched and then took part in a couple of hundred healings. And as a non-believer, a couple of hundred healings. And then the question was, what am I learning from this? Because people would come in, they'd have a problem, we'll call it X. You did hocus pocus with your hands. They left, they were better, not necessarily cured, but they were better, and a process of curing happened. And after a couple hundred healings, it got too redundant. The people were happy, most of them, because they got better. But I wasn't happy because I'm very selfish and I wasn't learning anything. So I decided a couple of hundred healings into the process to try to take this into real basic science labs and to do really basic bench work to try to figure out what in heaven's name is going on. So am I delusional? Are the other people delusional? Is it suggestion? Is it, yeah, I mean, you can think of all the things. And so I rather infamously went into labs and started doing mice work. And since this guy was particularly good with cancer, we saw a boatload of cancer cures. I decided to take it into the mice with cancer in oncology labs. And this included being in medical schools, this included being in biology labs. And at this point, I've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of mice in 20 experiments with mice. I have many experiments with cell cultures. I have I have a lot of experiments. And so if you've read my book, The Energy Cure, it's outdated. Read it if you like, if you think it's cute. But if you can get much more recent stuff on the website. And these will be academic papers, which tend to be the kinds of things nobody reads. But nonetheless, here we go. So that's the short version. And I'd be glad to take questions after. So I'm going to see if I can get this thing to work. The plot. I like to give the plot out and give away the story. I'm going to talk about research on healing and do that very quickly. And then we're going to talk about storing healing, and we're going to talk about scaling healing. And I don't have any pictures of mice. I think I have pictures of mice parts. Yeah, I don't think I have any actually full pictures. If anybody really needs pictures of mice, I got thousands of them. There's a bunch on my website. And if you like to play with mice, I can push you in the right direction. So I want to do a little bit today, research on healing, generic research on healing, and then storing healing and scaling healing. And we'll take it from there. Now, the idea of healing, so we start out with research on healing. Most of the time, most of the research on healing looks something like this. You got a healer and you got a healee. So you have somebody who sits there and does whatever they do, and this is just something off Spotify. They put their hands on, or they put their hands near, they put their hands someplace, and they do whatever their technique is. But oftentimes, more often than any other model, it involves hands-on healing. Even though the hands here aren't technically on, it's still hands-on healing. And this person has his eyes closed. I have no idea why. I don't think healing is sacred. I don't think healing is mysterious. It's unexplained, but it's not sacred or mysterious. It's interesting. It's cute. But we're used to healing like this, one-on-one. Now, what happens in the world, and I mean the planet, how many people need help? So let's assume, just as a thought experiment, that my healer here has healing ability and uses whatever technique she uses and heals him whatever his problem is. So I don't care what it is. So she can do weird stuff. He needs weird stuff happen to him. Here comes my question. If you've seen this happen a couple of hundred times, what do you do next? What do you do if a healer fixes a healee? What have you accomplished? Well, for the healee, you've accomplished something, and presumably the healee is pretty happy about that. But what do you learn? And how far can this reach? There's certainly more than this guy who needs help. And so there are hundreds and hundreds, thousands of thousands, millions and millions of people who need help. And no matter how many healers we get, and even if healing is teachable, and I don't know if it is, but healing, even if healing is teachable, and you go out and you teach some 10 people, and each of those 10 people teach 10 people, and each of those 100 people teach 100 people, and each of, and so you get, even if you have a geometric progression of the number of people that can do this, the number of people who need help far exceeds the number of people who can heal. I mean, it's not even close. So if we want healing to be widespread, in other words, to be available to anybody who wants it, we need to produce millions and millions. I would take it farther, frankly. There's certainly at least 1 billion people who need healing. How do we get to the 1 billion people? And it's pretty obvious she's not going to do it. Even if she does it all day and all night and all weekend and all everything and teaches other people to do it, she's not going to get all the way. There's still, how do we deliver millions and millions and millions of dosages? And that's what I'm working on now. So I've worked on healing and what happens and what are the correlates. But then at the end of that, if I understand something about healing and how it's delivered, how do I get it to the masses who need the healing? That becomes the problem. In order to make it then conventional, we need to do 2 things. Store healing, we got to put it in a box. We got to put it in a bottle. And we need to scale that bottle. And then we can get 1 billion people. Maybe. That's what I want to talk about here. Can we get, instead of the sound of healing, it could be, how do we get 1 billion doses out there? We're not going to do it this way. So, in order to do it, we need to store and we need to scale. We're used to that all over the place, but now when we talk about healing, suddenly we get into a mysterious realm, and it's hocus pocus, and do I believe, and do I have to get, and what, and you go crazy about, because it's a little unorthodox. How do we make it so it's just an everyday occurrence? How do we make it so we can get it anywhere we want? How do we make it so we can download it? How do we make it so we can go to the pharmacist and get healing drops? How is it that you get the idea? We need to store it. We need to scale it. So we are already familiar with this. We can take electricity. We can take lightning. We can stick it in a bottle. And if I say I took lightning and stuck it in a bottle or a container, you wouldn't flop on the floor and say it's not possible. If I say that about healing, you're much more likely to say that's not possible. But we've all come across batteries. And batteries do what? They store electrical stuff. And then, of course, we can make a boatload of batteries. So batteries, if I need to get some electricity, I don't need to run around wringing my hands. How do I get electricity? How do I get electricity? People walk around wringing their hands about how do I get a treatment? How do I get a healing? How do I? I want to make it ordinary. I want to make it not a big deal. I'm going to go out and get a battery. Beautiful. I'm going to go out and get a healing. Beautiful. You need to be able to store it. You need to be able to scale it. So we do this in food. This, I think, is fish oil. You say, I want some fish oil. Well, you probably don't go down to the water and kill some fish. Leslie, with her background, just throws her rod and reel out there right behind her, and she brings up a fish and she squeezes it for the oil. The rest of us go to a drugstore. And we go to a vitamin shop. We pick up some fish oil. So the idea of storing whatever's in fish oil is not exotic. In getting a bottle of fish oil, if you want a boatload of oil, it's not exotic, but healing still has that exotic. Do you believe in healing? Well, I don't say, do you believe in fish oil? Do you believe it's possible to store electricity in a container? It's a stupid question. It wasn't a stupid question a couple hundred years ago, but now it's a stupid question you never asked, you believe it. So I did about 100 years worth of research on what in heaven's name happens in healing. And I can give you, from previous research in healing, lists of things which I have. I mean, we can't do it tonight because it takes too much time. Any one of these dots could be a night talk. Cures abound. Well, I could show you a bunch of cures from healing, but it's one-on-one, healer, healee, or some variant of that. Now we get into some interesting correlates. You can heal from a distance, and the distance doesn't matter. Now that's easy. That's pretty interesting. There are a bunch of people in healing or healing land who, they all know this. I mean, it's not like I'm giving you a big secret. Distance is irrelevant. So you're, or most people, I think from here are in North Carolina. I'm in New York. If I do hocus pocus and my client is in New Hampshire, doesn't matter. Florida doesn't matter. North Carolina doesn't matter. New Zealand doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Now, spend a little time thinking about that, because I can't talk about it, and I can't. Any of these dots, I can give you multiple replications in independent labs. It's not a matter, do you believe this? Do you believe distance is irrelevant? It's a crazy statement. Be like saying, do you believe in gravity? No, I don't believe in it. There's gravity. How it works, different issue. How to use it, different issue. But is there gravity? Yes. Does distance matter in healing? No. And I can say that not as a believer, but as an empiricist who studied and studied and studied, and I have multiple labs confirming the same outcome. Distance is irrelevant. Now, I don't have time to go through all of these dots, but if distance is irrelevant, just stop and take a listen for a bit. Distance is irrelevant. How can that be? So I got a client, I'm making this up, who's in Idaho. Can you help me? I don't know, but let's do it. It makes no difference to me whether the person's in Idaho and I've ever even met them, or the person's in the next room here, or the person's in the room here. Doesn't make any difference. If that's the case, what do we conclude? I mean, seriously, what do we conclude? I mean, the first thing you want to conclude, and it's not really a debatable proposition, is that this isn't energy. I understand the irony because I have a book called The Energy Cure. When Sounds True gave me the cover and the title and said, we're calling it The Energy Cure, I said, and this is a dozen years ago, I said, I don't think there's any energy involved in healing. And they said, thanks for your input. And they didn't care. They didn't care because people think in terms of energy healers or energy healing or that kind of thing. Well, it turns out there's no energy. If there was energy, it would diminish with distance. I think I just lost something here. No, this could be a Margaret save. No, I think I'm okay.
You're good, Bill.
Okay, so this is still there. Yeah, if I lose it, I got to yell for Margaret. If distance is irrelevant, it means there's no energy. All energy conforms to a very simple formula. If I'm sitting there talking to you and we're in the same room and I start walking away from you, it gets quieter and quieter and quieter. Distance doesn't get, or healing doesn't get quieter with distance. And coupled by the question, how does it hit the target? You know, if I'm hitting the target in Idaho, how does it know how to get to Idaho? How does it know the target? How does it know what to do? And the answer is very simple. I have no idea. And I've been doing this for more than 100 years. I can say without equivocation, distance is irrelevant, but I don't know really all the ramifications of what that means. So we know a bunch of stuff that I don't have time to go in here. But most of the stuff we just simply don't know. And so I've just listed, this slide could get very, very, very long, hence a lot of et ceteras. Is healing energy? Well, I'm pretty sure about that. Is it information? I think it's information. How does it work? Heavens, I don't know. How does a distant treatment hit a target? I don't know. Why do different healing techniques produce different outcome? I don't know. How much of the variation depends on the individual healer and the individual so I can keep listing you stuff that the reality is, though I've been doing this for 100 years, I just don't know. And not only do I not know, but I know something about the people who think they know. They're all wrong. And I don't say that like, do you believe? And I think I'm right and you're wrong. I don't have a clue. And here's the deal. As I've gone around the world, I have never met someone who knows how this works. I've met a lot of people who claim to know how it works, but about 30 seconds of interrogation and they don't have a clue.
So, Bill, could I interrupt you for a second?
Interrupt for more than a second.
And I was going to say what we don't know, that's from a scientific perspective, I think,
Yes.
rather than from an experiential perspective. It's a difference between subjective and objective experience or knowledge. Would that be a correct way of saying it?
No, I would say a lot of people don't know a lot of things. They've never even tried to experience it.
Okay.
So I understand where you're coming from, and I don't think I would agree with the bulk and the implications of what you're saying. And there are a lot of people who go around going, I can do this, or I'm a healer, or I can go. I'm not disputing that. But how does it really work, and how do you hit your targets? The list of things we don't know is pretty long.
Okay.
And,
Because
and
I think
not just, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was going to say, I think that'll be a great topic for conversation when we get to the Q&A.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe we'll come back in 100 years and I'll go, the good news is I got 3 of these done. The bad news is the list got 5 times as long. And I would say the biggest list, if we could have it, and I knew what it was, would be a slide that says, here are the things we don't know, we don't know.
Hmm.
And that would be page after page after page. I just tried to get this on a single slide. So we have research on healing, which means, does healing happen? How does, what are the correlates to it, et cetera, et cetera. And there's most of the literature on healing is about this kind of stuff. What are the correlates? How does it, what are the things it works with? What can males do it differently than females? Can this, can that? Do you have to believe? Do you do that? But there's very, very, very little on storage and scaling. So I want to talk to you a little bit about storage and scaling. So let's go with storage. Can we put lightning in a battery? I'm giving away the answer by saying it's a battery. Can we put nutrients in a pill? Yes. Do we know how to do it? Yes. Can we do the same with healing? Here you go. You're going to be surprised at this. Yes. Why does it work? Damned if I know. How does it work? Damned if I know. Does it work? Yes. Can I make it predictable? Yes. Can I store healing? And if so, like in the battery, how do I do it? Even if I don't understand how a battery works, even if I don't understand how healing works, can I stick it in stuff? Yes. So I can't go through all the experiments I've done on storage, but here's just a short version. We've stored healing in organic material and inorganic material. So for example, organic storage, cotton is a wonderful storage medium for healing. So let me give you a show and tell here. I don't have any cotton with me. What's going to substitute is a napkin. So just thought experiment, because I don't have any cotton here. This is cotton, probably partly cotton, but it's organic material. It's cotton. I can hold it in my hands. Can this holding of cotton in my hands, then with cotton applied, can the cotton itself, without any human intervention, reproduce the healing when a human touched it? Yes. So example, and again, I'm not giving you the data in any detail, and this is done at Brown University. I take a piece of cotton and I hold a piece of cotton, and we're in a lab, and then I bring near the cotton a gaggle of cancer cells. As the cotton gets closer to the cancer cells, they don't have to touch, but as the cotton gets closer to the cancer cells, the cancer cells genomically change. So the proteins do this, this does that, the other thing does the other thing, and all sorts of stuff happens to the cells, the cancer cells. Now, the cancer cells aren't believers, as far as I know. The cancer cells aren't asking for a healing, but they can recognize whether cotton has been charged. That's reasonably interesting. We can do it with cell medium. So if you're doing studies with cells, it's called in vitro studies. If you're doing studies with cells and you got a bunch of like cancer cells in a well plate or a test tube or whatever you got it for storage, you got to have the cells in some sort of nutrient bath. They need to live, they need to get the nutrients they need to get. We can treat the cell medium that you get off the shelf, the organic nutrients that are given to cells. We can treat the cells, we can treat the medium and ship the medium to another lab. This was done at University of California, San Diego, multiple times, and ship them the cell medium and then pour the cancer cells into the cell medium, and they get wild reactions. In other words, the cancer cells here are also recognized. This isn't ordinary medium. This is medium with a kick. This is high test. This is doing something. We can store healing in a mouse. So some of you here are familiar with some of my mice studies. If we can treat a mouse and then try to give that mouse cancer, it can't get cancer. That's reasonably interesting. If we don't treat the mouse, we inject it with cancer, it gets cancer. We can get a mouse that's been injected with cancer and treated and take blood from that mouse and put it into an untreated mouse, and it'll cure that mouse. That's reasonably interesting. And the list can go on and on. It turns out we don't know what you can store healing in. Is a lot of stuff. We can also store it in inorganic materials. So water, for example, is inorganic. I don't mean this like it doesn't have pesticides, that use of organic. I mean, it doesn't have a carbon atom. That's all organic means. Right? I mean, it has a carbon atom. And so water is inorganic. Can we store healing in water? And the answer is unequivocally yes. I have many, many, many studies where we're taking water. I'm trying to put this up there. We're taking water and we treat the water, and I'm going to call this treated water. And we take treated water and we feed this to cancerous mice. And we put it in their little place where they drink. And they can come get as much water as they want. Nobody treats them. Nobody tries to heal them. Nobody does anything. They're just drinking treated water. And again, treated water I'm defining as held by someone who thinks they know how to heal and intend to store it in the water. The drinking of the water to mice you never meet will cure the mice. We also have a bunch of anecdotal clinical outcome from this that you may be interested in, but not now. We also have recordings of healing intention using a variety of recording media, and I'm going to show you a couple. You can record healing, you can record healing intention, and the playback of that healing intention will reproduce the healing. And that's reasonably interesting. So we've got an axis, or we've got one question: can we scale healing? Can we store healing so that it reproduces the effect? And I put that on a little XY graph that I can't get to. I can put that on a little XY graph. And so down here on the X, we have scalability. And over here on the Y, we have effectiveness. So hands-on and distant healing has low scalability. Go back to the woman treating the man. Let's say that whatever the man is now had, and they're cured. Well, that's a fine thing. So they're cured. And so they're very effective. We put our hands around a cage of mice, the mice get better. That's very effective. But there's low scalability. How do we get this out to 1,000 people, 1,000,000 people, 1,000,000,000 people? That becomes the scalability. The image you have of the woman treating the man works. I have no question that it works. The question is, what does it work on? What does it not work on? All those other kinds of things. But it has very, very, very low scalability. So this guy gets healed by the woman, and he goes prancing off into the sunset, and let's assume he's cured for life. Beautiful. One treatment, one fix, one application. How do we get that up to 1,000,000? How do we get that up to 10 million? How do we scale it? And it turns out hands-on healing is not really scalable, even if it's teachable. And I think it might be somewhat teachable, but even if it's teachable, there's a limited number of people you can teach. You'd be like, oh boy, I got to put this wonderful thing together, a vitamin, but I can't make any more. That's what hands-on healing is. I can make a vitamin, but I have to do it one at a time. Cotton and treated water are also high in effectiveness, but relatively low on the scalability. So if I treat water and we feed it to cancerous mice, we get effects. If I treat water and we feed it to cancerous people, we get effects. If I treat water, there are effects. So I don't question that it works. I don't question that it works very, very well. I think probably cotton and treated water may do as strong as hands-on, which is what you're used to. Now, how do we get that out to 1,000,000 people? We got to get the scalability problem solved. And the scalability, there's going to be a difference now between treated water, here's the water I'm going to treat, and what I'm going to call informed water, which is water which has been informed by healing information. It turns out that's scalable. It turns out treated water is not so scalable. I mean, I can treat a bunch of water. I can treat a gallon of water, and you can spread it out around mice cages, but you're not going to get to 1,000,000 dosages. I can get to through informed water, I can get to 1,000,000 doses. I'm going to show some of that stuff in a little bit. If you can record healing and play it back, and we could put, for example, healing in the cloud, and you can download it, that's scalable. That's globally scalable. That's a piece of cake to hit 1,000,000,000 people. But it turns out, so far, in my experiments and other people's experiments, that this movement along the y-axis, you're losing effectiveness. So informed water seems to be as good as cotton. Informed water seems to be as good as treated water. Informed water seems to be as good as hands-on and distant healing. But informed water can be scaled. And that's where we separate the wheat from the chaff. We can get to 1,000,000, 10 million applications. And I can't get to the slide I want. There we go. So far, and you'll see a little bit in a second, studio recording will do amazing things in the lab, but I don't think it's as good as informed water. It's scalable, it's maximally scalable, but it's not as scalable as informed water. A recording in a sound studio will do amazing things. There are different ways to record. So we've got over here effectiveness. We want to be maximally effective, and we want to be maximally scaled. If we want to be effective and scaled, we're not going to be playing over here. If we want to be effective and scaled, we're not going to be playing over here. If we want to be effective and scaled, we want to be in this sweet spot. We want to have a recording that gets a little better, a little better, a little better as a technology. We want water to get as widespread as possible to get scalability. But this, remember this slide. We want to play up here. So if you want to get scalability and storability, you want to be playing in this top right corner. And I'm going to show you what happens when you play in this top right corner. So I'm going to show you what happens when you inform water with healing intention, what happens when you record healing intention. Any quick questions? Or should I keep going?
I would keep going. We'll take Q&A at the end of your presentation.
Okay. And if anybody's already asleep, just hit the off button. So here's the place I want to play. Here's the place I've spent the most time playing with. And I got a bunch of propositions I can back up, but I can't get it to 1 billion people. Up here, I can get maybe to 1 billion people. And that's what we're working on right now. So this is the research arms that I'm currently doing. I used to be doing primarily, I used to live over here for a good 100 years or so. Then I branched out for a bunch of years. And now I'm saying, ta-ta, let's play in this and see what we can do with this. So the research arms, and I got a bunch of research projects going on right now in a variety of labs, in a variety of countries. I'm a nut. The storing and scaling of healing, the research arms now, can we record, because that's maximally scalable, and can we do water, which I think is maximally effective. I'm making a distinction between treated water and informed water. That isn't going to go away. This is treated water. It's water that I've taken and tried to do hocus pocus on, and then we apply the hocus pocus to see what it can do. Informed water is water that has been mass produced by a gizmo, of which I'm a partial inventor. So it's mass produced by a gizmo. We can take this gizmo, put water in, and have unlimited amounts come out, and they all do the same thing. It's a little nutty, but it works. I'll show you some of the stuff. So I have a research agenda and recordings going on right now. I have water agenda, research going on right now, and the water is further broken down into treated and informed, and I'm pretty much doing everything on informed water. You know, I don't care that, I care, but I don't care anymore that, okay, now we have hocus pocus water, it'll fix this or fix that. Interesting, but it's not going to get, if I break this up into 1 billion doses, I can't give it out. So let's look at the research arms first of the recording and research arms of the water, and then we'll see where we go. So on the recording side, I've got recordings done in a Faraday cage, and I've got recordings done in a sound studio. And these in turn are broken down into basic research, which means I'm doing laboratory research, and clinical research. And I haven't done much I haven't done almost anything on the clinical research of recordings. I'm about to, and we're getting ready to start, but we're not, I have more basic research on the recording. So a ton of this stuff. In vitro means I'm using cell cultures. In vivo means I'm using animals. If it's in red, that means it's part of the research arms, but it hasn't been done yet. So if it's the lighter color, it's been done, and it's been done multiple times in multiple labs. If it's red, we haven't gotten there yet. It's on the drawing board, but we haven't finished it yet. So let's look at the recording first, and then we'll look at water. This is a study I did a number of years ago. This is inside a Faraday cage. A Faraday cage is a electromagnetically shielded room. So you're not going to get any pollution, any electromagnetic, or you're going to get very little electromagnetic pollution inside a Faraday cage. This is a 12-foot by 12-foot room. It's 2,000 pounds of insulating equipment. This is a big deal to do. It's not casual. And in this room, we put a bunch of stuff, we put a bunch of stuff, we put a bunch of stuff, we put a bunch of stuff. Since we don't know what we're doing, we put 38 different kinds of detectors in this room. So there's little microphones around and little detectors around and little antenna around and on and on and on, for the reason that we don't know what really works. So let's put everything we can think of in a room, run it, and then see if we can record healing and see what happens. It was crude, but this was one of the opening salvos. So what happens is this. In this Faraday cage, 3 people who know my technique hold a piece of cotton, because we know we can charge cotton, hold a piece of cotton and do my rapid image cycling technique. And as we're doing this, 3 people who know the technique are charging the cotton, 38 detectors are running. We had to build a custom-made supercomputer. This was expensive. Custom-made supercomputer, which we download and reduce to a WAV file. So we got all these complex antenna and measurements and this, that, and the other thing, and we come out of there with a WAV file. And this is what we do. So this is an ordinary amplifier from Amazon, $49. This part was not expensive. To build the little recording we have and to get it set up in inside the Faraday cage was north of 300,000. And we're building now, or we have a $49 amplifier, and here comes the kicker, $49 speakers, which we bought these speakers only because we knew it would fit in the amplifier. So there's nothing exotic. $49 speakers, $49 amplifier inside a incubator. And down here, you can see, I hope, a couple little containers. These are containers with cancer cells in them. So the design is pretty simple. The door is shut, the temperature is controlled, the amplifier is there off screen, there's a computer. The computer plays our recording of a bunch of people in the Faraday cage, goes to our cheap amp, goes to our cheap speakers, and it's played. I mean, it's literally played like a WAV file. It's literally played to cancer cells. Now, the cancer cells, as far as I'm aware and have been able to see, don't seem to have good hearing. They're just in the incubator, and we're playing this thing in, and then we find out what happens to the cancer cells. Does the recording, with unlimited scalability, does the recording affect the cancer cells as cells? And it turns out we wrote a pretty interesting paper about this. And one of the interesting parts was that it was published in a biology journal. So this is a traditional biology journal. This isn't Hocus Pocus Quarterly. This is a traditional biology journal. And the short version is here. Now, again, what we're looking at is what happens to these cancer cells when they're played this recording. And it turns out we get some pretty interesting findings. We looked at 167 cancer genes in that little container, and 68 out of them reliably change when we play the recording. So we're looking at the genomics of this and that and the other thing, and what happens in a very short order, the cancer genes, the cancer cells recognize that something's going on with this recording, and the genes start flipping on and off in the direction to enhance healing. So we have some pretty interesting things. Some of the genomic changes we have are ways to increase telomere length, which is going to be an offshoot of healing. Some of the stuff is associated with other kinds of genomic changes. Some of the stuff is, we get the same pattern over and over. We did this 7 times at Brown University, and we get the 68 genes changing. Now, what those 68 genes are and how they affect and what they do and exactly why these 68, we're still working on. But what I'm trying to get at is this isn't belief. This isn't faith healing any more than the cancer cells brought near a piece of cotton that's been charged. If the cotton hasn't been charged, you bring it near the cancer cells, nothing happens. If the cotton's been charged, they start gene flipping and doing all this. They do the same thing if they've heard a recording. So we have reproducible changes. It's a reliable effect. That's reasonably interesting. We can capture and release healing intention, which means we can turn it into a technology, which means if it's a technology, we can put it in the middle of the room and have everybody work on it. It'd be like coming out with, we've come out with the first car. You know, we got a Model T. And we go, look, we got a car. Well, the Model T isn't as good as a 2023 car. It's not. And what's happened? You got the Model T and you made it fancy. You got the Model T and you made it better. Cars today are better. This can be made better. But right now, we're still a little bit at the Model T stage. Wouldn't it be fun if we could just get it and have all the cancer genes flip off? And we put that into the cloud and we say, nah, the first billion are free. Be kind of fun. Now, it turns out so far, this is number 3, hands-on healing put around these same cancer cells still seem to be stronger than the recording. We got to make the recording better. We got to make the recording stronger. But hands-on, you remember my two-way graph, hands-on works, and the recording doesn't work as strong. It reproduces a bunch of the stuff, but not all of it. Which means we have a technology. It means we have demonstrated it can be healing can be captured and released, but it means our job is not finished. So once we finish with the Model T, we're not putting away all our car designs. When we finish with this recording, we're not done. We're not done. But we show the concept. The Model T showed a car can be mass produced. We've shown this can be mass produced, but it can be made better. And we did not publish number 4 because it was a biology journal and biologists are a little reluctant to go too far out on a limb. I think that's fair. What happens when we play the recording to the incubator is that the space of the incubator becomes what we can call conditioned space. And that means even without the recording, once the recording has played, the space itself becomes the stimulus for producing the later genomic changes. What does that mean in English? I can screw around it with this room. I could play the recording in this room, and there would be an effect to anybody who came in. Now, think of the potential implications of that. What if we condition the space of a healing clinic? What if we condition the space of a doctor's office? What happens if we condition the space? You get the idea. And we're working on that right now, trying to set something like that up. I suspect we're going to have a difference in clinical outcome if we condition the space that the people are, whether they're getting conventional treatment or non-conventional treatment. So this is reasonably interesting. And we said, let's see what happens if we play this to mice. And this is also done at Brown. So this is in vivo, meaning the body's experiment on mice. And we took breast cancer cells and we exposed them to various exposure times of the recording. And we set up a treatment room. And so here it's the exact same setup, except now we're dealing with a bunch of mice, a bunch of mice, a bunch of mice, same speakers, same amplifier. Now you can see the computer. And this thing is completely automated. Nobody goes in this room. And so at a preset time, the computer goes click and the recording starts. And at a preset time, the recording stops. And we started this again at Brown. We started to get ulcerations in the cancer tumors of the mice. This is similar to what we found with hands-on stuff. And so we start to get reproducible ulcerations. This is a good thing when you see this, incidentally. If you're in healing, this is good stuff. And the next step in this we've done from 20 hands-on treatments is that these tumors now implode and the mice are cured. They would have been cured by the recording. They would have been cured by the recording. The recording is scalable. So what happened though is we had a bunch of complications. It's not cheap to do this stuff. Again, the setting up the Faraday cage and such was north of 300,000. This getting the mice in there and getting the thing cost a little bit north of 140,000. And the animal ethics people came in and killed our mice. That was kind of rude. That cost me $140,000. But they killed the mice and they said, well, look, they're suffering. Well, they weren't suffering. They were clear-eyed, they were bushy-tailed, they were eating, they were drinking, they were playing pinochle in the cage, they were having a good time. Everything was going fine. But when the animal ethics people who will shut down anything, the animal ethics people looked at them and they said, tumors, we got to get rid of them. And that happens. Nonetheless, we had enough data to do another good paper to another biology journal, and we showed some really interesting effects. This is from the recording alone into mice. We have produced biological effects that are reliable, and we get some increases in this and decreases in that. And these weren't subtle changes. So for example, spleen weight in the mice that were killed had increased 5-fold. Spleen weight is an indirect method of getting a reading on immunology. And so if the spleen starts to increase, probably something has stimulated your immunological system. And we think that the healing goes through the immune system. We're probably wrong, but that's what we think. In the mice that we couldn't finish, the spleen weight increased 5-fold. So we took it on the road again, and I just took this on the road, just got back on the road, and this is in Tokyo University. We took 3 different kinds of mice and 3 different kinds of cancer models. So we had breast cancer, we had bladder cancer, we had melanoma in 3 different types of mice. And we ran the recording, same idea, same setup. And we found in particular significant increases, the strongest increases in the breast cancer model. We had differences in blood measures. We had. And we have a mystery out there. I don't know what to do with this. The bladder cancer model didn't develop tumors. I don't know if that's because we fixed them or that's because we had something wrong with the cell line. So I gave it the most conservative interpretation possible, which is, it was probably a bad batch of cells. Nonetheless, we just finished another paper, which is also reasonably interesting. This is out of the Japan work. And we had, again, significant things. You can, if anybody wants to read these in detail, if you're a little bit masochistic, they're on my website. So you can look up the research, and I think there's 20 or so articles, there may be more, on the mice studies. So let's flip to the other side of the arm. Water. Basic research means we're doing really fundamental lab research. For example, if we give water to mice, it's an in vivo study, basic research on water. Water comes in 2 flavors. I don't really mean flavors, but water comes in 2 flavors, treated and informed. And let me say it one more time. Treated water is taking some water and treating it and seeing what happens. Informed water is put through a device. No human touches the water, and we come out with unlimited amounts of water that we can use. That's informed water, but both are water. So treated, hands-on, you're doing something, wrap cotton around a water container, that would be treated water. Informed water means turn on the spigot and give me 12 gallons. Turn on the spigot and give me 1,000 gallons. We can do all that. If we're doing it on people, we're doing clinical. This shouldn't be read because I've already started. I'm doing a study on longevity of worms. We've done a pilot study. We have many more replications to go. This is also in Providence. And we have C. elegans worms that have been, they don't live very long. They live about as long as a mouse does after it's injected with cancer. And we have worms in a worm holder, and 1 drop of our informed water has been placed in the food of these worms. And so far they're living 10% longer. That's reasonably interesting. So this shouldn't be read anymore because, you know, a lot of stuff's coming along. Using informed water, we've done this a number of times on clinical studies. So I've got 3 clinical studies. I got 2 COVID studies. I'm about to do some hepatitis studies. I want to take on long COVID, and I want to see if I can get rid of bacterial stuff. So antibiotics, for example, are growing less effective when time goes on as they've been overused. I want to see I can get an antivirus response. I want to see if I can get an antibacterial response and eliminate the need for antibiotics. That's coming down the pike, I hope, in the next couple of months. That would be kind of fun. So, clinical trials. I'm going to describe the clinical trial on 3 human trials, general trials, and then 2 trials using explicit COVID. And we're using only informed water. So here's informed water. This is made in a machine. No human has touched this water. And we have a bunch of different flavors of this stuff. Restore is a general health promoter. We'll call it that, a general health promoter. Recover is alleged to be an antiviral formulation. So you want to get rid of a virus, flu, you take some Recover, you take some Restore, you're boosting the immune system, you're boosting general health, you're also getting rid of the virus. This will work on, I mean, I can't really back up this statement, any flu, but so far, any flu. It'll get rid of a boatload of numbers of colds and things like that. And it'll also get rid of COVID pretty quick. Is it really 8 o'clock?
Yes, it is.
Oh, drat.
I was going to ask you, Bill, can we publish the web address for your water?
Oh, sure. It's in the, yeah, I just found out it's 8 o'clock. Yeah, I talk too much. Why don't you come in and say, shut up? She was in there going, shut up. Yeah, oops, sorry about that. Okay, so let me get through this pretty quick. Yeah, on the website, you can see where to get this stuff if you want to try it for yourself. But let me just we've got a number of different things that will do this, that, and the other. I've done a couple of clinical trials on using the informed water. We gave out we did this 3 times, twice in the States and once in Europe. We gave out to 100 volunteers with various conditions, and they took sublingual drops, 2 drops under the tongue, 4 times a day of the Restore. And so we have 300 people taking these and reporting, self-reporting symptoms and this, that, and the other thing. And I just give you the real short version. It's really dumb because 98% of the people report getting better in one way or another by taking this water under the tongue. We then took it on the road and we decided to do a clinical trial with a real trial on COVID. Since we're alleging to be able to get rid of viruses, this was a seriously controlled study, double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled on 160 people going into a hospital to be treated for COVID. And they took both types of water to do this. So they took under the tongue, it was a different dose. They took 2 doses, 2 drops of each under the tongue, 6 times a day. The whole thing was blinded. So I didn't know the people. I never met one of the patients. The doctors giving it out didn't know what they were giving the patients. They didn't have these covers on it, didn't have labels on it, didn't have anything like that. They just had containers of water, 2 drops, come back and do it in a couple hours, 2 drops, And then we looked at what happened, but the whole thing was double-blinded, randomized, placebo-controlled, and they took both types. All of the water was informed. No human touched it. I'm starting to get laryngitis. And this was just recently published. The short version, because I think I can get to a short version real quick. The short version. We had tremendous effects, in particular on the symptoms that are difficult to get rid of. So you have some things like, I have a cough. Coughs linger. They're in the hospital, they're being treated for COVID. They got the PCR test, they got all that stuff. They're getting medical attention, and they're also getting our sublingual drops. And then we compare how they do, the drop people versus the medical people. The drop people were also getting medicine. So we're not comparing this to nothing. We're saying if you go in a hospital and get medicine, conventional medicine, how do the drops stack up against them? And the answer is they do better than the conventional medicine by a significant amount. You want to read this? It's, again, double-blind, placebo-controlled. It's published. It's all this kind of stuff. I think it'd be fair to say we have the strongest effect size on COVID that's known. I don't think that's an exaggeration. It's not putting down the medicine, but this is better. Water is better than medicine. It's interesting. So let me get rid of this. Click, 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 and just. There we go. So this looks at the whole thing in kind of bigger picture, bigger terms. I'm going to shut up. That was the short version. I'd be happy to go to any road you want, but call it in 15 minutes so Margaret doesn't kill me.
So, Bill, thank you. That was a very interesting presentation. I do want to ask you if you could talk about the initial mice studies you did for the energy cure, because you had some things that had never happened anywhere in the world before.
Yeah, and we still do. We still do. We have full lifespan animal cures. We have full lifespan human cures too, but we have full lifespan animal cures in a mouse model that has never had a cure.
And could you explain that about how the mice were grown or whatever to lack this resistance?
And that was a hands-on. That was no, storing and scaling.
Yeah.
So we had people, volunteers, inexperienced student and faculty volunteers, put their hands around cages of mice where you would have 100% guaranteed death in a month. And we have pretty close to 100% full lifespan cure by putting your hands around the cage. To apply it to this stuff, we'd ask the question, can you take informed water, which means water coming out of a gizmo, and do the same thing? And can you do it from a recording and do the same thing? And it seems extremely suggestive that we can, but really carrying it out a number of times with the right conditions, we just hands around a cage, inexperienced volunteers who don't believe this stuff, turns out they can cure cancer in mice.
Okay. So
Mark?
yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead, Leslie. I was going to say, we'll let Leslie manage the Q&A from here on out.
Thank you, Mark. We do have a first question. So Stanley is asking, has your treated informed water been recognized by the FDA?
No, it's entirely experimental, and we're in a laboratory right now in Washington State, testing the water to see what in heaven's name is going on here. So this isn't an FDA trial, although it was tight enough. The double-blind thing would be an FDA trial, but we were doing this out of the country, and we were doing this to volunteers, and we were doing this under medical supervision.
Thank you.
And it also wasn't, we weren't taking away medicines from anybody. I don't know that there's a whole lot of ethical problems that there could be.
So Sheila would like to know, before scaling up to billions with informed water, should it be shown that the scaling acts the same in humans as in mice?
Well, we haven't done the scaling sufficiently in mice. We have about 800 people that have gone through clinical trials of the water. And we're about to start maybe some clinical trials for volunteers using the recording, but certainly more than 800 people.
Thank you so much, Bill. All right. If you would like to ask a question directly, please use your little raise the hand. And Bill, I'd like to stop sharing the screen so that we can see the participants.
Get rid of it. Okay, how do I do this? Stop share. Got it.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, got it.
All right, so if anybody would like to ask a question, please raise their hands. I do have one, Bill, the informed water. As it goes through the gizmo, I noticed on the label, it said that it was resonant water. Are
Yeah.
you using some sort of vibrational treatment?
No, we made up
water?
the name trying to make it legitimate, but I don't know if it works, but it's a fairly arbitrary name.
All right, so are you using intention then as it goes through the gizmo?
No,
No,
the
okay.
gizmo itself produces the water that works. There was initial water that had intention associated with it, but then that water is dumped in the gizmo, and the gizmo then can churn out as much treated water as you want.
Okay, thank you. Stanley, you have your hand raised?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Have you looked at to see if there's any structural or chemical change in the treated versus the untreated water?
We have some preliminary, very, very, very preliminary, which I wouldn't pay attention to, nor would I know how to interpret, and that is the bond angle of the hydrogen to the oxygen seems to shift by some number of degrees. I don't know what in heaven's name that would have to do with healing, or how it would produce these effects. The same thing is true, and in the recording, one of the guys on my team has a PhD in signal analysis. I put together weird teams, but he's got a PhD in signal analysis. And I said, okay, so here's the recording. What in heaven's name is going on with the recording? Because we threw the 38 detectors in there and let the thing run. And he gave me 75 pages of technical output, a good chunk of which was over my head. And the bottom line, though, it says, essentially, I have no idea what's going on.
Okay,
I have no idea what's going on, and I have no idea why this would produce any type of healing consequence. None of this makes any sense.
Okay,
So I called him a loser, but he's still useful because he does the signal analysis for me. So it's a mystery, and if we come up with something like that, I don't know. And I have the water in various forms up in a lab now in Washington State, and it's going through a water lab, which is, they look for any characteristic. So I don't have the answer yet. We just had the first run through, but they won't even talk to me until they've done 3 different replications.
one other thing you might want to try is see if you heat the water, maybe boil it or freeze it, if that causes it to lose the effectiveness.
It's a good question. Yep. I have never tried this, but I raised it with people who allege to know this. They say it's not going to change it, and I go, I don't know. I got nothing, So all I can tell you as just a lowly empiricist versus a theoretician, I have no idea really whether that would matter. If anybody wants some water and want to try for themselves, by all means. A lot of stuff to be done. I got a scroll of stuff to do. I'm not running out of ideas.
Thank you, Bill. Jackie, I believe you have a question.
Yes, thank you. I was very intrigued by the cotton cloth carrying energy. Does it matter what color the cotton cloth is?
I don't know. Never been tested. We usually use the least amount of bleached, messed up, or putting it through the ringer and making it cute and ironing it and doing all that stuff. We just used the strongest cotton I've ever seen was walking in a field outside of Phoenix and there was cotton all over the ground. Picked up the cotton, and boy, would that charge. Really something. So I don't know if all the whiteness that's brought into cotton that you get at a pharmacy is a positive thing. It's probably not. But
Okay,
again,
so
you got a limit to how
dyeing,
much you can charge.
dyeing the fabric wouldn't matter one way or the other.
Don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would never say I know unless I've actually tested this multiple times.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any more questions from the audience?
Thank you.
Mark, you're muted.
Thank you. Bill, I don't know if you've read anything by Dr. William Tiller.
Yep.
He did some stuff, and he
Yep.
was saying that he achieved drops in pH water.
Oh, yeah.
from doing some kind of stuff there too. Is
Yeah,
there
his
some
stuff, his was done by what he called them super meditators. And you'd get a bunch of super meditators sit around, and they intend that healing or pH change be imbued in stuff. And then he'd mail that stuff to a lab and see what happens, and that's where it changed the pH. So they weren't just standing around doing it. And the average amount of change in pH was 1, which is quite a bit. You know, so it went from 7 to 8, or it went from 6 to 7, or it went from, 7 being neutral. Yeah, he put it in stuff, into things. That was taken on and gotten taken a little farther by Jacques Benveniste in Paris. And that was taken even farther, most recently, Luc Montagnier, who just died a couple of months ago. He won the Nobel Prize for the discovery of HIV. But he also went woo-woo. I mean, that's what people think. They think he went crazy. Actually, what I think is he just had sparks of genius, frankly. And he used to store, instead of all my gadgets and gizmos and wasted money, he'd store water on a beaker, or he'd put water in a beaker and he put it on a CD, and he wouldn't even play the CD. He would have something on the CD, and he alleged that it went into the water. I've never done that. Luke was an interesting fellow. So I have no idea what the boundaries of this might be.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the audience? Mike, I believe you've got your hand up.
Mike wants to know when I went insane.
I read your book, and I was most impacted by the lack of response you got from the scientific community, and I felt that it was, for you personally, very frustrating. Now, several years later, now you're publishing these research articles. Are you getting a different response now from the scientific community?
It's tough to tell, because some of the stuff is, I published a couple of papers even in the last couple of months, and they're all about scaling and storing and all those things. So it takes a little while to percolate before you could really answer the question. But I will tell you that I haven't been rejected as widely as some people think. I've, for example, and this is before my storing and scaling odyssey, I've spoken at, and I've done research at 6 different medical schools, probably a dozen more biology labs around the world. I've spoken to departments of oncology in medical school, and I've had 75 oncologists trying to cut my knees out, trying to find, which is fine. And then I end up with a standing ovation because they can't find a flaw. Now, the question is, what do you do with that? So imagine being an oncologist, traditional oncologist, doing oncology things, and this lunatic walks in, he's a mouse fondler, and he shows this, that, and the other thing. And no matter what you do, you're not sure what to do with it, so they tried to tear me down. I don't mean that maliciously either. They tried to tear me down, and Failing that, you're still left with, well, now what do I do? You know, so you can't take now, as an oncologist, you can't take your patient, say, get in the cage, you know, we're going to put you in a mouse cage and we're going to do this, that, and the other thing. Now, they might, if I can get a recording to reproduce this, you follow? You might, if you try the water and we do a clinical test and the clinical test works. And now at least I have something I can give someone, you know, as opposed to someone who comes in and says, I did hocus pocus, you know, and they got better. The next step after learning that isn't self-evident, but I can tell you in various parts of the world, and I really mean of the world, there are people who are more open than you'd think. And they can come up and go, that was great. That was great. You changed, you know, I'm going to think about this long and hard, and I'm changing my thinking, but it doesn't necessarily mean you can apply it, you know. So again, if you're a conventional health professional and I come in there and I got hocus pocus water versus I got someone putting their hands on is going to have a negative connotation. If I put water in, you don't even know what it is. It's, oh, the stuff's in water. I don't know what's it, you know. I'm trying to figure out what in heaven's name happened to the water. But if it works and you have a clinical mindset and I can give it to you, as opposed to saying, do you believe this? You know, if you just do, if you do this or you do that, it's a very different scenario. And so you get the storage and the storage in multiple media, and you get the scalability. You got something that's reasonably interesting.
Thank you, Bill. Do we have any other questions? Yes, Sheila, I'm sorry, please go ahead.
Thanks, Leslie. I enjoyed your talk. I follow you. I'm an admirer of yours. And I do understand about the frustrations that you must face. I think it all depends on finding the right people, the right place, the right time, because there are scientists out there who support. And it's not that they ignore the fact that there's no explanation for some of this. They know that.
Yeah.
It's just that they don't want to write it on paper. They
Yeah.
don't.
Oh, yeah. I agree. There's more curiosity out there than people are given credit for, but they're afraid, and they're institutionally afraid too, and they should be. So if I'm a traditional, if I'm going through medical training and I'm an intern, I don't want to be coming out saying, I got magic water. You know,
Right.
that's not gonna play well. If I'm, I used to be the president of the Society for Scientific Exploration for a dozen years. And this is a group of geeks and nerds from around the world who look at things which are unorthodox, but they look at it rigorously.
Mhm.
And one of our sayings is, first get tenure.
Mhm. Exactly.
Yeah,
The-
you don't want to
it-
go there. Look, I'm a newly minted assistant professor. I think I'll do a study on healing. No.
Right, right. And the boundaries are similar to people who are energy healers. And not that we want to convince everybody that we can heal using energy, but there is a following. There develops a following, and those
Yeah.
are people who have the faith and the trust that, yes, indeed, I feel a hell of a lot better. Thank you very much. I've been working on this for 20 years,
Yeah.
and now it's resolved.
Yep.
So those sorts of things we, even if we were scientists, wouldn't be able to step forward with. But it's interesting to note, you know, the famous scientists Einstein and Max Planck were the first to say, there's an intelligent mind here that cannot be explained, holding the atom together.
Yep.
And doing
Oh,
other
yeah.
things as
Yeah.
well.
Yep.
So I think, you know, what I would like to see in a lot of these studies.
Einstein had tenure.
Yeah, he did. I'd like to see more collaboration and more explanation or verbiage and the things that can't be explained, because I think in some ways that could open up some minds. And I also think Western Europe is a good place for studies.
Oddly enough, it's not. It's hard.
It's not?
It's hard. I when I first went over and did some stuff in, you know, I've done a little bit of research in Europe. I expected more openness than I found.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've been surprised. I mean, I can't really quantify this versus that, but it's I was hoping for more.
Yeah.
I was hoping for more.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might look into the Society for Scientific Exploration. And if you like geeks and nerds who look at weird stuff, you may find a home.
Yeah, I am very weird. So thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Sheila.
So I'm
Bill?
going to shut it down now. I think people are bent and they're probably thinking, what in heaven's name is he talking about? And by all means, go look at the website and read papers. And if you want, contact me and we'll get into a dialogue.
Thank you so much, Bill.
Okay. See you, folks.
And
Bye.
before we break for the end of the meeting, I do want to say we have 2 in-person meetings coming up in Charlotte and in Greensboro. We have an in-person meeting that's listed on the consciousness-cafe.com website for
1 second.
Saturday, October 28th. And then we have another one in Greensboro on Saturday, November 11th. So if you'd like to get out now that COVID's over, you know, people are starting to meet, or they've been meeting for a year. We just haven't done it. We're going to start meeting in person again. So look on the Consciousness Cafe website for those locations. But October 28th in Charlotte and November 11th in Greensboro. And with that, I'd like to thank Bill and thank you all for attending. Thank you all for the questions that were asked. And I hope everyone got something out of it and learned something new. Bill, thank you so much for showing us the things that have been so rigorously tested. I think it's important to show that there's been some rigorous testing around some of these things that people may think may be more subjective than objective. So with that, thank you everyone for coming, and thank you for attending the Consciousness Cafe. Take care and have a good night.